Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. My name is Natalia Moczulska and this is the news. Today is the National Day of Remembrance for the victims of German Nazi concentration camps and extermination camps. 84 years ago, a transport with the first Poles arrived at the Auschwitz German concentration camp. For more than 4 years of the death camp's operation, the Germans murdered nearly 1.5 million people. For this and other crimes, the Germans never paid the Polish state, and today they are trying to erase their responsibility. Today is National Day of Remembrance for the victims of German Nazi concentration and extermination camps throughout Poland. Exactly 84 years ago, the first Polish prisoners were sent to Auschwitz.
Od razu zaczęto traktować ich okrutnie.
They immediately began to be treated cruelly, with enormous, indescribable cruelty. Deputy Hess made the famous speech to them that they did not come here to a sanatorium, but to a labor camp. Prisoners at Auschwitz and other concentration camps were murdered in an inhumane manner. German guards shot people on any pretext. The fence was connected to high voltage. Those who were incapable of performing hard labor were murdered. This camp was established with the aim of liquidating Poles, Polish intelligentsia, and it was so until the very end. On the territory of occupied Poland, the Germans organized their death industry. Extermination camps were set up all over the country. To this day, the German people have not paid Poland the war reparations due, and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, in a meeting with Chancellor Scholz, said that our country would not get the money. In a formal, legal, international sense, the issue of reparations was closed many years ago. The problem is even bigger because the new government has paralyzed the work of the War Losses Institute, which was in charge of the fight for reparations. Its director was fired, his notice was delivered by courier, and the Prime Minister, despite requests, did not meet with him. The War Loss Institute is drifting. There is no one to manage it. It is not clear what will happen. In my opinion, unfortunately, it will be liquidated during the summer. That is, when there will not be too many people interested in it, because everyone will be on vacation, and it will just quietly liquidate. Germany has been successively erasing its responsibility for World War II since the end of the Second World War. In their lying narrative, the murderers were Nazis without nationality, and on the official display at the German Foreign Ministry, there was information according to which the war began in 1938. Also missing was information about the invasion of Poland. For several decades, we have been dealing with the consistent policy of Germany, which wants to transform itself from the role of executioners into the role of victims. In Auschwitz alone, up to 1.5 million people were killed, of which the vast majority were Jews. 75,000 were Polish people. However, historians point out that these figures are severely underestimated. Remembering their sacrifice and who murdered them is our duty. Paweł Włoch, TV Republika. U.S. President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a joint security agreement on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy. President Biden and top global allies are acting on dual fronts to reinforce their solidarity with Ukraine as it fights off Russia's invasion. U.S. President Biden and Ukrainian President Zelensky signed a 10-year bilateral security agreement on Thursday, June 13th, aimed at bolstering Ukraine's defense against Russian invaders and getting Ukraine closer to NATO membership. The deal signed on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy aims to commit future U.S. administrations to support Ukraine, even if former President Donald Trump wins November's elections.
The United States is going to help ensure that Ukraine can do both. Not by sending American troops to fight in Ukraine, but by providing weapons and ammunition, expanding intelligence sharing, continuing to train brave Ukrainian troops at bases in Europe and the United States, enhancing interoperability between our militaries in line with NATO standards, investing in Ukraine's defense industrial base, so in time, they can supply their own weapons and munitions. Working with Ukraine's partners to build a future force that is strong, sustainable, and resilient. And supporting Ukraine's economic recovery, as well as its energy recovery, after Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's energy grid with massive attacks in the futile attempt to break the will of the Ukrainian people.
Historic day. And we have signed the strongest agreement between Ukraine and the U.S. since our independence. And this is something that will not only provide security, but also new good jobs for Ukrainians and Americans. The issue of NATO is covered through the text of the agreement. It states that America supports Ukraine's future membership in NATO and recognizes that our security agreement is a bridge to Ukraine's membership in NATO.
The president of Ukraine called the agreement historic. The U.S.-Ukraine security deal is a framework for a long-term effort to help develop Ukraine's outdated armed forces and serve as a step towards Ukraine's eventual NATO membership. President Zelensky has long sought NATO membership, but the allies have stopped short of taking that step. The Western alliance regards any attack launched on one of its 32 members as an attack on all, under its Article 5 clause. In the event of an armed attack or threat against Ukraine, top U.S. and Ukrainian officials will meet within 24 hours to consult on a response and determine what additional defense needs are required for Ukraine, the agreement says. Under the agreement, the United States reinstates its support for Ukraine's defense of its sovereignty and territorial integrity amid a renewed push by Russia on Ukraine's eastern front. It also outlines plans to develop Ukraine's own defense industry and expand its military. Earlier today, NATO defense ministers commented on Russia's nuclear arsenal as they arrived for a second day of meetings in the alliance's headquarters in Brussels.
I think that the nuclear rhetoric that we're hearing from the Kremlin is just that, rhetoric. At the same time, nuclear weapons is serious, and you shouldn't use them in this way, I think. We have nuclear capabilities as NATO. We take that very seriously. That's why we discuss it, review it, talk about it, check if everything in place. But we never would use it in that type of rhetoric that we're hearing from Russia.
Estonian Defense Minister Hanno Pevkur warned that the alliance members needed to invest more in defense.
Good morning, everyone. Russia will not change. Russia's threat is increasing, and when we look also at how much Russia is investing at the moment to defense, this year close to 9% of their GDP, then we all understand that when we put in comparison our 2% in NATO or 3.5% in Baltic states and Poland, then still we need to invest more.
On Tuesday, June 11th, Russia said its troops had started the second stage of drills to practice the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons alongside Belarusian troops after what Moscow said were threats from Western powers. NATO defense ministers posed on Friday, June 14th, for an official photo on the sidelines of the two-day talks that centered on the military support package for Ukraine, and next month's NATO summit plans to take place in Washington, D.C. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg has proposed NATO to take on coordination of international military aid for Ukraine, giving the alliance a more direct role in the war against Russia's invasion, while stopping well short of committing its own forces.
We have agreed on a plan that sets out how NATO will lead the coordination of security assistance and training. This will allow NATO leaders to launch this effort at the Washington summit in July, putting our support to Ukraine on a firmer footing for years to come. It will consist of a NATO command located at a US facility in Wiesbaden and at logistical nodes in the eastern part of the alliance, under a 3-star general reporting to Supreme Allied Commander Europe, SACEUR.
The move is widely seen as an effort to provide a degree of Trump-proofing by putting coordination under a NATO umbrella, giving alliance military staff more autonomy to get on with the job, with less direct political involvement. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the United States gathered like-minded nations at a Ramstein air base in Germany, establishing a group of now some 50 nations that meet regularly to match Kiev's arms requests protests with pledges of donors. This so-called Rammstein group will continue to exist as a U.S.-led political forum, but NATO will take over the military working level below that coordinates arms deliveries and training for Ukrainian troops. Russian President Vladimir Putin said earlier on Friday that Russia would end the war in Ukraine only if Kyiv agreed to drop its ambitions for NATO membership, hand over the entirety of 4 provinces claimed by Moscow, and carry out a demilitarization.
You know, Putin has illegally occupied sovereign Ukrainian territory. He is not in any position to dictate to Ukraine what they must do to bring about a peace. I think, you know, that's exactly the kind of behavior that we don't want to see. We don't want to see a leader of one country wake up one day and decide that he wants to erase borders and annex the territory of his neighbor. That's not the world that any of us want to live in, and so I think you know, he is not in my view, not in a position to dictate to Ukraine what it must do to pursue peace.
Russia controls nearly a fifth of Ukrainian territory in the 3rd year of the war. Ukraine says peace can only be based on the full withdrawal of Russian forces and the restoration of its territorial integrity. Yesterday, firefighters in Chile conducted a rescue operation for a family and their pets who were trapped by rising water levels in the Mapocho River in Santiago. The family of 4, along with their 4 dogs and 3 cats, were residing in a makeshift home under a bridge next to the river. Along with our municipal team and fire brigade, we are in a rescue operation for 4 people who had refused to live and receive attention. But now with the flow of the river, we were able to bring them out, along with 4 dogs and 3 cats, which were rescued by our veterinarian team. Now they will receive medical attention as well. Due to heavy rains, the river overflowed, prompting local authorities to intervene and rescue them. Despite initial resistance from the family, the animals and people were set to receive medical care after their rescue. That's all for the news tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.